Well, it is a joy to be here, and I must say this does feel like a second home to me. It's always fun to be back, so thank you for having me. I hope you're so enthusiastic when I'm finished. And just before I start, I've got to say this. I have very high hopes for this message this morning. Now that may seem like a funny thing to say. Shouldn't you always kind of have high hopes for your messages? Well, actually, I learned to be a realist about this. I've been preaching for quite a while now, and it didn't take me long to work out something. Most people weren't going to remember what I preached on the week after I preached it. It's a fact. And that used to bother me, because I thought every message, I was like mainlining it from God, delivering it was going to change everybody's lives. And in fact, I remember one time I had somebody come up to me after the service, and they said, I just want to thank you. It was a fantastic message. I loved it. It spoke so beautifully to me. Thank you so much. Being naive at this time, and because they approached me, I made the mistake of asking a question that I don't ever bother to ask anymore. I said, what bit spoke to you? At which point there was terror in their eyes. And we had this little moment with us standing there, and I suddenly realised you couldn't tell me back what I said, could you? And they went, yeah, I really liked the middle bit. Came a little bit of a joke between us over the years after I'd get down and say, how did you think the middle went? But the fact is, this is the way it is, and that used to bother me until I realised that sermons are like meals. I don't remember what I ate last week, or 2 months ago, or a year ago, but it sustained me. And most of the time, that's what a good sermon is. It's something that sustains our soul. It gives us nourishment, it keeps us going, but it's not necessarily going to be something that we will remember for the rest of our lives. Most of the time. What I want to speak on this morning is something that I remember hearing when I was a small boy. And it has stayed with me my entire life. And some messages are like that. Some messages hold a truth that just implants itself in you. And there are some messages I can remember from 30, 40 years ago. I've heard several hundred since, and probably thousands, and they were good, but there are times when something jumps out. So I believe the very simple truths that we're going to hear today are capable of changing lives, because they changed my life. And they very dramatically affected the way that I interacted, particularly in the church. And so I want to share those with you this morning. And I've entitled this message, How to Be Mighty, which is a wonderfully pretentious title, isn't it? If I was to ask you, how many people here are mighty? I'm pretty sure I would probably get nobody who would put their hand up to that one. Because it sounds pretentious. I imagine that most people here would say, yeah, we're kind of ordinary people. We generally would agree with the summation of the believers in Corinth that Paul gave in 1 Corinthians 1 verse 26. For consider your calling, brethren, that there were not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble. And that's us. We're just a bunch of ordinary kind of Kiwis or others, and we're just ordinary people, and we're not noble or wise or mighty, but we're not bad people either. We're just kind of ordinary believers. Well, the question I want to ask you this morning is this. Is that all we have to be? Are we destined in life just to be ordinary? Or is there a chance that we could be mighty? We all kind of secretly dream that, don't we? It would be awesome, us, a mighty orc, or a mighty superhero, or we fantasize about being mighty, about having the respect and admiration of other people. People looking at us and going, wow, that's pretty impressive. So is that possible? Well, I believe it is, and for one simple reason. And we're going to look at a scripture which really sets the tone for what we're going to look at, and then we're going to jump back into the Old Testament for most of today. But this is a very key scripture. It's found in 2 Corinthians 13, and we'll read verses 3 to 4. And this encapsulates a theme that actually runs through a lot of Paul's epistles. So reading from verse 3. Since you are seeking for proof of the Christ who speaks in me, and this is a key part, and who is not weak towards you, but mighty in you. For indeed, he was crucified because of weakness, yet he lives because of the power of God. For we also are weak in him, yet we will live with him because of the power of God directed towards you. And this, as I said, is continuing a thought that Paul has been exploring in the previous chapters. In the chapter before, in chapter 12, verse 10, he said, "For when I am weak, then I am strong." A very interesting dichotomy. So what if being mighty is simply about allowing God to be mighty through our weakness, through us? What if all those amazing people that you read about in the history books, we saw some of them up here who took the gospel into amazing places, saved lots of people. What if these people who did mighty things, what if the only difference between them and us was that they positioned themselves for God to be mighty through them? And that was a very important way I phrased that. They positioned themselves. Because we know that God's power doesn't automatically just flow through us when we become saved, do we? It's not like we suddenly start walking around, oh, lepers, healed. Shadow falls on somebody, cancer, gone. That would be really awesome, wouldn't it? Or, we just start, suddenly we, just know things and we can just preach in the moment and thousands of people all get saved. It would be fantastic. But we know why that doesn't happen, don't we? Because if God doesn't work character in us, what would that do to us? We'd become bent and walked out of shape, wouldn't we? At the very least, we need humility in order for God to be able to work through us in whatever way that may be and whatever gift that may be. So while we know that mightiness doesn't have to come from us, it's more likely to come through us from God, there is still a part that we have to play. And so my message really is about how do we position ourselves so that God can look down and go, you know what? I'm going to use them. They're ready. So that we can rise above the mundane, that we don't have to be ordinary, even though we remain weak. And the answer, I believe, is surprisingly easy, surprisingly attainable. And let me reassure you of this. For many years, I thought the answer to that question, who does God use? Well, God uses the super Christians. The ones who know their Bible back to front, carry big, big Bibles like this. People who don't make mistakes. People who, while not sinless, are pretty darn close. The super Christians. I used to believe that until I discovered something. There's no such thing. We are all flawed believers making our way through this life. And the more I came to work with church leaders, the more I realized sometimes they're more flawed than the congregations they lead. Present company excluded. We are all just on the same journey. There are no such thing as super Christians, and that is not what is required. God is not waiting until you shape up, because you never will. And if you wait for that, you'll be waiting a long time. So, what I want to do now is I want to look at some examples in the Bible that I believe is going to give us some very basic principles that will help us to see how we can be mighty in God's eyes, how we can do things that take us into the extraordinary. Does that sound good? Are we intrigued, interested? Excellent. So, I can think of no better place to go than a bunch of people who the Bible literally calls mighty. We're going to look at David's mighty men. So you might want to put your finger into 2 Samuel chapter 23. So, who are these guys? David's mighty men. Well, they were a bunch of just over 30 men who were kind of King David's champions, best warriors, and they did some pretty amazing stuff. And actually we're going to focus on the 3 who stood out even from amongst the 30. Sort of the mightiest of the mighty. So how mighty were these guys? Was this some kind of cheesy club name? Guys like kind of macho names, don't we? Is this something they called themselves? Did they have secret handshakes? Did they make up obscure rules and sing club songs? Was it that kind of group? No, these guys were tough. These guys were tough in an age when it was really hard to be tough. These were men who knew about battle, who had been through innumerable conflicts. They knew what it was like to spill blood. And not like it's done today, at a distance. They looked men in the eyes and they took their lives. So how tough were they? Well, let's read from verse 13 of 2 Samuel 23, and we read a little story about what these guys got up to. During harvest time, 3 of the 30 chief men came down to David at the cave of Adullam, while a band of Philistines were encamped in the valley of Rephaim. At that time, David was in the stronghold and the Philistine garrison was in Bethlehem. David longed for water and said, "Oh, that someone would get me a drink of water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem." So the 3 mighty men broke through the Philistine lines, drew water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem, and carried it back to David. But he refused to drink it. Instead, he poured it out before the Lord. "Far be it from me, O Lord, to do this," he said. "Is it not the blood of men who went at the risk of their lives?" And David would not drink it. Such were the exploits of the 3 mighty men. Alright, so David's thirsty and he makes this pretty much throwaway comment. "Oh, I wish I could have a drink from the well in my hometown." Now, the point of this is not so much that there was no water anywhere else to be had. He's more lamenting the fact that his hometown has been captured by the enemy. But the 3 mighty men show that they were not just in the army to cash in their paychecks. They were not there just because chicks like a man in uniform. They were there because they loved and were loyal to their king, to the point that even his whim, they read as a command. Just another point to explain from this passage is I always used to think David was a bit of a jerk here. It's like these guys, at great risk to themselves, go get this water, and he pours it out. I can imagine the 3 of them kind of sitting there going, "What? Dude." But what David is actually doing here is something very beautiful. What he says is, what you have done is so amazing that no one is worthy of that much honor and glory except God. So I'm going to take this water, I'm going to refuse to take it for myself, and I'm going to give it to God. And in doing so, he honored these men. He said, "You did it here. I'm saying, you took it higher. This was something that only God could be worthy of," which is pretty amazing. So, these guys were very tough hombres. When it says that they broke through the lines, all right, they hacked and they slashed their way through. People died. The Philistines were not like, "Oh, you want a cup of water? Oh, go on then. Come on, guys. Whoop. Fill your boots, get some water. There you go, don't be strangers." No, these were their sworn enemy. What's worse, these were the regional superpower of the day. The Philistines had found out how to craft iron weapons before everybody else. They were the best armed soldiers in the world. By today's standards, these were guys with the drones and the cruise missiles. This was not an easy task at the best of times, but these were the best of the best in terms of the armies of the world at that time. And they broke through their lines. People died for this cup of water. I kind of suspect that they didn't have to fight quite so hard on the way back. I kind of picture a Philistine going, "What the heck was that? Look at these bodies. There's like 30 of them. How many guys attacked? 3? What? They're coming back? Hey, is that the time? Sorry, prior appointment." Someone else is going, "Yeah, I think I left the oven on." You would not want to get in the way of these guys. All right, so we've established the fact that these guys did not get their nickname, the mighty men, at a late night drinking session in the RSA. All right, they earned this the hard way. These were men who knew about battle and excelled at it. So let's backtrack a few verses and we'll get an introduction to each one of our heroes. And all I want to do is just see what simple thing made them who they are. And the answer is surprisingly simple. And each one has a very important lesson. And this is what I carried with me all my life. So let's go back to verse 8. These are the names of David's mighty men. Josheb-Basshebeth, a Tahkemonite, was chief of the 3. He raised his spear against 800 men whom he killed in one encounter. All right, 2 points. First of all, I'm more of a Greek scholar than a Hebrew scholar, so if I'm mispronouncing the names a little bit, forgive me. Secondly, he killed 800 guys in one battle. Yeah, right. And I caught a fish this big. You know, we read something like this and we go, oh yeah, the Bible's being a bit loose here, or it's just a story. Actually, there were 8 guys, and one of them had bad asthma. And, you know, over a few beers, the tail stretched. You know, nobody can kill 800 guys. Okay, you're just being a bit silly here, Bible. Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Because if we understand ancient warfare, while this is mind-blowingly impressive, this is nowhere near impossible. See, we struggle with this because we tend to think of modern warfare, not the video games, but modern combat. And the big difference is guns. When we think of war, we think of guns. Now, guns are what are called a force multiplier. You don't have to be strong, you don't have to be fast, you don't have to be that bright, you don't even have to be that good with a gun. If you point it in the right direction and pull a trigger, you will get a result. The gun does the work, not you. Indiana Jones taught us this. Remember the first Indiana Jones movie? The guy comes out with a sword, just goes bang. Gun versus sword, gun wins. And there's actually, we're getting a bit of history today, we actually saw this historically in feudal Japan, where the samurai class pretty much disappeared overnight for one reason: guns. You see, the samurai trained all their lives. They were experts with a number of weapons: the katana, the wakizashi, the longbow, a whole range of weapons. They were warriors supreme. They were 100 times, if not 1,000 times better than anybody else. But it only took one peasant with a gun to kill them. And what's more, that peasant didn't have to have a lot of training, and you could arm 10,000 peasants with guns. And that movie that was shot up in Taranaki, The Last Samurai, was basically showing how that time when the samurai completely got supplanted by modern warfare. But this is not the way it was back in Joshua's day. There wasn't any warfare arranged. There was no force multipliers. It was mano a mano, one-on-one. And what that meant was, the more skillful, faster, stronger, more experienced fighter would pretty much win every single time, unless you got lucky or they got tired. That means one individual could make a huge difference in a battle, massively. There are historical examples for what I'm talking about. In 480 BC, the Persian king Xerxes attacked Greece, brought the largest army that had ever assembled anywhere in the world up until that time. The Greeks were not prepared. They managed to get like a quick reaction force of 7,000 men. The historians estimate that the Persian army was between 500,000 and 2 million strong. Literally, people thought it was an earthquake when the army marched. That's how big it was. So anyway, what happened is they came to these foothills that the Persians needed to pass through near a place called Thermopylae. And what the Greek general did is he took his 300 best fighters, the Spartans, and put them in the valley that they had to pass through. This was portrayed in a documentary called 300. A Hollywood, very bizarre version of this. But this was a real historical event. And what happened is, for 3 days, 300 men held off the entire Persian army. And they would have kept doing so, except a traitor showed the Persians a track which allowed them to go around the back and surround them. And even then the Spartans didn't surrender. They realized they had to buy time for the Greek army. And so they fought to the death. At the end of it, it is recorded that those 300 men killed 20,000 Persians, including the Persian super elite unit called the Immortals, who turned out to be anything but. Okay, so that's 300. We also have the account of Horatio at the Sublician Bridge. And both Roman historians Livy and Polybius recount this. The Etruscan army had come unawares on Rome and was marching on it. And there was one bridge between them and Rome. And they needed to cross this bridge, the Sublician Bridge. And the Roman garrison there saw this army coming over the hill and went, "Not today," and ran. Except for one man, Horatio. He planted his feet in the middle of the bridge where they could only come at him one at a time. And he fought an entire army for a whole day and killed everyone they sent against him. While he was doing this, the only Romans that were in the area were some engineers. So they started dismantling the bridge behind him. So he's busy fighting away, and they're like, tear it to pieces. And finally the Etruscans could see what was happening, so they went, we're not going to win this. So they just said, like, everybody pile on. And so they all just jumped on the bridge, they were climbing, trying to get at Horatio, and all they did is actually destroy the bridge. Finally the bridge collapsed. Horatio fell into the water, and despite his armour, he managed to swim to the Roman side, where obviously he was considered a pretty big deal and a hero. He was given all the land that he could plough around in one day. I have no idea how much land that is. Wouldn't be much if it was me doing the ploughing, but presumably it's a lot. Okay, so what the Bible is saying here is actually not far-fetched. This is entirely possible for one person to have such an influence on a battle. It's an amazing physical feat, but it's not impossible. Alright, so with that out of the way, what do we learn from Joshua? How did he position himself so that God could be mighty through him? Well, he did something very simple, but something that most people struggle with. He simply engaged even though the odds were against him. He saw the size of the problem and said, I don't care, I'm going in. The sad news is in churches, most people see something and go, it's too big, I'm out. That was not the way that Joshua saw this. Because guess what? He didn't kill 800 people in one go. He just went, okay, I'll start fighting. And one at a time, he took them on. And slowly the tally started to mount. The other thing is, the fact that he killed 800 implies there were at least 800 more of the enemy than they had. I can just, again, I have a very vivid imagination. Bear with me. But I can kind of imagine the Israelite army standing there, looking over and kind of going, there's a lot of them. And remember, they have the better weapons. Wow, yeah, lots more than us. You know, maybe this isn't a good day to do this. And then someone goes, shh, Joshua's coming. It's like, hey, Joshua kind of walks to the front, goes, alright boys, looks like a good day for it. I call dibs on the 800 on the left flank. What's that going to do to your morale? Oh, I'm sorry, what? Yeah, no, those 800 are mine. If you don't mind, okay. Sure, buddy, whatever you say. He's going, okay. As long as I'm fighting next to this guy, I'm all good. Well, here's my question. In your life, in your church, are you the person people want to stand next to? Because they know that no matter what goes on, you'll be like, yeah, let's do this. Come on. Let's go. God and us, we're all good. And that was Joshua's secret. He wasn't put off by the size of the problem because he was too busy being part of the solution. And I can tell you what, because I spent years doing this. It's easy to look into a church and see problems. I was great at standing on the outside, pointing my finger in. Well, that could be, I wouldn't do it that way. Until someone challenged me on it and said, why do you talk about the church in the third person? Aren't you part of it? And I suddenly realised I had to step inside the line and go, you know what? How about I become part of the solution? It's easy to point fingers. It's hard to roll up your sleeves and actually do something about it. But that's what Joshua did. Let's look at our next guy, Eleazar, from verse 9 to 10. Next to him was Eleazar, son of Dodai the Ahohite. As one of the three mighty men, he was with David when they taunted the Philistines gathered at Pasdammim for battle. Then the men of Israel retreated, but he stood his ground and struck down the Philistines till his hand grew tired and froze to the sword. The Lord brought about a great victory on that day. The troops returned to Eleazar, but only to strip the dead. Now, whenever the Bible gives you extra information, there's normally a reason. So we're told now where this battle occurred on the map, Pasdammim. And this was the traditional place where Israel and the Philistines met. The Philistines would march out a day from their borders and they would camp in a nice safe area. And then the Israelites would come out and they would line up on the opposite hill against them. And this place, Pasdammim, means boundary of blood. Because this is where they traditionally fought. Although, what would often happen is what would happen this day. The Israelites would come out, line up, and go, ooh, yeah, no. So they'd do the whole Monty Python, French Knights routine, kind of like, I fart in your general direction and all that kind of stuff, and then run away, being very brave. But on this day, they ran away except for one man. And again, my vivid imagination, takes me to the commander's tent in the Philistine camp. Commander's sitting there looking at a map. Guy comes to the door. Yes, Sergeant, what is your report? Sir, I wish to report that the enemy has run away. Very good, Sergeant, carry on. Why are you still here, Sergeant? Sir, I wish to report the enemy has run away except for one man, sir. You're kidding. No, sir, I am most earnest in my report, sir. Well, go kill the guy. Yes, sir. 60 seconds later, whack. Okay, you two, go kill the guy. Whack, whack. Yeah, somebody get Battalion online. I think we've got a problem. Alright, so what do we learn from Eleazar? Well, firstly, he didn't give up just because everybody else did. You know, in our society we have such a herd mentality. We're all good with something as long as people will go with us. But will we stand alone? Will we do what needs to be done if no one else is there, and in particular, if no one else is there to notice us do it? Secondly, and to me this is the major point, he took a stand and he didn't give up when it got hard. He fought until his hand froze to the sword. And this is what I struggle to see in church. You ask any pastor and they will tell you this, and I'm sure that this is not true in any way in this church. Most people will do anything until it gets hard, then they give up. Until there is the slightest physical discomfort to them or inconvenience, and then they're out of there. It is so rare to find somebody who will say they'll do something and will continue to do it even at personal cost. It's a simple lack of faithfulness. But he held on till his hand froze to the sword. Have you ever held on to anything that tightly? Reminds me of a story, this is a true story about a pilot in a small commercial plane. He saw the warning light saying that there was a problem with the back door. So the captain went to the back to see what it was. He kind of sort of see if it was closed properly, and the door flew open and sucked him out. And the co-pilot's like, whoa, the pilot's dead. Mayday, mayday, and made an emergency landing, and all the passengers are freaking out because they've just seen this pilot get sucked out of the plane. And it took them 10 minutes to land the plane. And much to their surprise, when they got out, they found the pilot. On the way out, he managed to grab the ladder the passengers descend on. Here's the interesting thing, is it took them 10 minutes to land the plane, it took them 20 minutes to prise his fingers off the ladder. He'd been battling 200 kilometre an hour slipstream, freezing conditions, and apparently his head was that far off the runway when the plane landed. Why did it take them so long to get his hands off the ladder? Because how tightly you hold on depends on what's at stake, doesn't it? His life was at stake, so he was holding on. Eleazar held on because he believed in what he was doing. And he wouldn't let go until his hand froze to the sword. And I love the way this story ends. It says, the Lord brought about a great victory that day. Firstly, this reminds me that while no Israelite stood with Eleazar, he did not stand alone. And the other thing is exactly what we've been talking about. God did something mighty through him. It was the Lord's victory. But Eleazar got to be mighty. And we come to our last guy, Shammah. My personal favourite. I don't know if you're allowed to have favourites, but I do. Because this is the story that probably touched me the most when I was a boy. So verse 11 to 12. Next to him was Shammah, son of Agee the Hararite. When the Philistines banded together at a place where there was a field full of lentils, Israel's troops fled from them. But Shammah took his stand in the middle of the field. He defended it and struck the Philistines down, and the Lord brought about a great victory. So that's quite remarkable about Shammah. And it's not apparent from this, but if you read the list of the 30 other mighty men, you will find this. His son is there. His son Jonathan. Which means that at the very least, Shammah is in his 40s, but given that it would have taken time for Jonathan to rise to the rank of one of the 30, he's probably well into his 50s. And he's rocking it out like this. And this is a reminder, the game is not over till we say it's over. I don't care how old you are. You know, our culture puts so much emphasis on youth. And that's okay, youth has passion, that's great. But age has experience. I know which I'd rather have. Someone said, would you like to go back to being 20 again? Only if I can know what I know now. And what I'm saying is, God doesn't want the youth alone. He wants everybody. Everybody has a part to play. But the real lesson from Shammah is a beautiful one. Now, once again, note it tells us where the battle took place. But now it's not a name on a map. it describes the land. It says it was a lentil field. And lentils are kind of like beans. They're a staple crop that's eaten all over the world. And I make that distinction, or that comparison, because if you've ever heard the expression, it doesn't amount to a hill of beans. What that means is it doesn't amount to much. Even a hill of beans is worth nothing. Well, it's pretty much the same with lentils. They're not worth anything. Nobody went, oh my goodness, the Philistines, they've got the lentils. Not the lentils. Oh, hang on, 50 another fields of lentils over here. What that means is Shammah was given the job of defending something that had no intrinsic value and no strategic value. It's only lentils. Everyone else has run away, I'm here by myself, and it's only lentils. But here's what made Shammah different. Here's what made him faithful. Is he went, no, these are my lentils. This is my bit of land I've been given to protect. And if you want it, you're going through me. Bring it on. This is what stayed with me all these years. And I can safely say, I can think of no greater reason of why I've ended up becoming what I've become in the church and becoming a pastor. It's simply this. Whatever I've been given to do, I've learned the lesson of Shammah. Do it as if it's the most important thing in the world. It doesn't matter how small it is. I worked out once that I have done every single role in the church except lead women's ministry, for reasonably obvious reasons, and lead worship, because I sing like a buffalo dying. So, but everything else I've done, I've cleaned the toilets, I've looked after children, I've done everything. Where there was a need, I always tried to treat it as if it was the most important, because God gave it to me. As Hudson Taylor, the great missionary, once said, a little thing is a little thing, but faithfulness in a little thing is a great thing. Shammah was faithful with the little that was entrusted to him. And it says the Lord brought about a great victory. Now, just before I wrap this up, there's just one other thing that these guys can teach us, and it's not obvious in this context, but if you read further, is these guys were the best. No doubt about it. No one else could match them. But we read later that Abishai, who killed 300 in one go, a little bit of a lightweight, he was made their boss. Then Benaiah, who killed a big Egyptian, a lion, and two of Moab's champions, he was made the head of David's bodyguard, a very prestigious position. Zoab, who doesn't even get a description, he didn't do anything that was worth accounting in this list, he was made commander of the whole army. So here's the thing, these guys could have beaten anybody else. Maybe even David himself. Yet they just simply served where they were put. They had a humility. They weren't doing what they wanted to do for want of recognition or promotion. They just said, this is what I've been given to do, and I will do it to the best of my ability. And I think this is probably one of their finest qualities, their humility. Because you see, not everybody in the kingdom is called to be a leader. Simply because not everybody's gifted that way. It's not a big deal, because here's the truth. While not everybody's called to be a leader, everybody is called to be mighty. So, just in conclusion, what I'm suggesting today is God is not looking for mighty people. God is not waiting for you to make the grade. God is looking for faithful people who he can be mighty through. And there's a very big difference. In Proverbs 20 verse 6 it says, many a man claims to have unfailing love, but a faithful man who can find? So what does it mean to be faithful? What does it mean to be in a position that God can be mighty through us? Well, from Joshua we learned to put yourself in the fight. Just do it. Just become part of the solution, no matter how hard it looks. Have enough faith to remember that God plus one equals a majority. From Eliezer, don't give up. No matter how hard it gets, no matter if it starts to cost you, don't give up. And from Shammah, value and fight for whatever God puts in your hands, be it little or be it a lot. And one of the things I've learned is that what it says in Matthew 25, God is actually serious. Unless you're faithful in the little things, he won't give you a big thing. But so often we get given a little thing, we go, it's just a little thing. I'm waiting for the big thing. We will never get that until we deal with this faithfully. And from all of them, we learn to be humble and loyal before God. Whatever it is you're doing, do it unto God. And who cares if anyone notices? If you're doing it for God, you don't need people to notice. You don't need to be recognized for it. Your reward is when you hear God say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And this is how we position ourselves for God to do mighty things for us. We simply be faithful. Simply be faithful. Get in the fight. Don't give up. And just do whatever God puts in your hand as if your life depended on it. And this will never fail to get God's attention. You may feel it's little things, but God will go, "All right, that's someone I can use." God wants to take your weaknesses and He wants to show His strength through them. And on this basis, there is not a person in this room who is not capable of doing mighty things. In fact, the weaker you are, the more qualified you are. There is not a person in this room who cannot mightily change the circumstances in their own lives, in their own careers, in their own family environments. Whatever it is that you need a breakthrough in. But there's more. There's not a person in this room who simply by being faithful, in the way these men have demonstrated, cannot change this world. People have done it. Not because they were somehow super Christians, simply because they were faithful. And God said, "Thank you, that is enough. Let's go do this thing."